May 28, 2026, 3:05 in the morning. Saky Air Base, Western Crimea. 8 Su-30SM fighters sit wingtip to wingtip on the northern dispersal apron. 2 still have fuel bowsers plugged into their wings. A ground crew of 6 is walking the line, finishing a shift change that started 40 minutes late. Floodlights on tall poles throw long shadows across the concrete, and a duty officer's cigarette is the only thing moving faster than a walk anywhere on that apron. Nobody on that flight line believes they are looking at the last ordinary night of their deployment. Then the first warhead hits. No siren, no tracer fire from the Pantsir battery 400 meters east. Just a flash, a shockwave that cracks windows in Nova Fedorivka 5 kilometers off, and a fireball rolling off the tarmac in a color that has no business existing on a runway. 90 seconds later, a second impact, then a third. Russia had spent 3 weeks flying roughly $400 million worth of fighter jets into what its own commanders called the safest airfield left on the peninsula. It took a swarm of Ukrainian drones 11 minutes to make that math look foolish. How 14 drones crossed almost 230 kilometers of open water, slipped under an S-400's radar horizon, and threaded a gap between 2 Pantsir positions without a single one getting flagged is the part Russian state media spent 4 days trying not to explain. We'll get to the gap. First, you need to know why 8 jets were sitting there at all. Crimea's western coast used to be Moscow's rear area. Not anymore. By April 2026, Ukraine had already struck Belbek Air Base near Sevastopol twice, hit a helicopter squadron at Decoy once, and knocked out a radar station outside Chornomorsk that never came back online. Russian aviation planners responded with something that looked defensive on paper: consolidation. Instead of spreading fighters across 6 exposed strips, the 43rd Independent Naval Attack Aviation Regiment began pulling its Su-30SM jets back towards Saky, a Soviet-built base with hardened taxiways, its own fuel depot, and 2 Pantsir S-1 short-range systems dug into the perimeter. An S-400 battery sat 18 kilometers south, covering the sea approach. On paper, it was the strongest air defense umbrella left on the peninsula. In practice, that umbrella was built around a single Soviet-era assumption baked into its design: that the threat would come from the air, fast and high, not from something slow, low, and cheap enough to lose 14 of at once, without blinking. Between May 3rd and May 24th, 2026, 8 Su-30SM airframes flew in from bases further east. Each jet runs somewhere around $45 to $50 million, depending on the avionics fit. Park 8 of them together, and you're looking at close to $400 million of hardware on one stretch of concrete. Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate, known as HER, had been watching that stretch of concrete for a lot longer than 3 weeks. 200 kilometers north, in an operations room nobody photographs, a wall of monitors runs a rotating feed of commercial satellite passes, intercepted radio traffic, and drone camera footage stitched into a single timeline. Analysts there don't call it a war room. They call it the board. And by early May, the board had a folder on Saky thick enough that a junior officer joked it needed its own filing cabinet. Every fuel truck movement, every new revetment, every change in guard rotation got logged, time-stamped, cross-referenced against the last satellite pass. This is the unglamorous part of a strike like this. Not the drones, not the fireball, but weeks of someone squinting at grainy imagery at 2 in the morning, building a pattern out of nothing anyone else thought was worth writing down. I went back through the open-source satellite passes from that period, and one detail kept nagging me. The build-up at Saky wasn't a secret. Plane-spotting channels on Telegram were counting airframes in near real time. Russia wasn't hiding the reinforcement. It was broadcasting it, like a dare. This base is untouchable. Come and try. A Ukrainian drone unit, operating under HER's long-range strike program, call sign Group Shulika, had already flown 3 reconnaissance passes over the base by early May. Their tool was the Lyutyi, a fixed-wing strike drone with a reported range past 1,000 kilometers, a roughly 50-kilogram warhead, and a production cost estimated between $150,000 and $250,000 per unit. Later variants reportedly carry a simple inertial guidance package backed up by satellite navigation, cheap enough to build in the hundreds and expendable enough that losing 3 or 4 on a single mission barely registers against the budget of the jets they're aimed at. That's the arithmetic that should worry anyone parking a $50 million jet on an open apron. One drone costs a fraction of 1% of the aircraft it's built to destroy. The plan almost died in the first week. Ukraine's early reconnaissance drones kept getting picked up by Russian ground radar near Yevpatoria, forcing 2 flight paths to abort mid-route in the second week of May. A commander with the unit, identified only by the call sign Beryl, later told a Ukrainian outlet that the team scrapped an entire western approach corridor after losing contact with 2 scout drones on the same night. Losing 2 airframes to figure out where not to fly is not a footnote. It's the cost of doing this kind of war. The team pivoted south, plotting a route that hugged the curvature of the Black Sea instead of cutting straight across it, staying low enough to sit under the S-400's detection floor for most of the run. By May 20th, the operators had something they hadn't had 2 weeks earlier: a gap, a narrow radar seam between the coverage arcs of the 2 Pantsir batteries, open for roughly 6 minutes during a routine rotation of Russian patrol boats along the coast. 6 minutes. That's the whole window. Whatever happened next had to happen inside that window, or it didn't happen at all. The reconnaissance phase closed with a decision nobody wanted to make out loud: wait for the reinforcements to actually land before striking, even though every day of waiting was a day the target could scatter, add decoys, or simply fly the jets back out. What the operators didn't know yet was that Russian ground crews were about to hand them something even better than a parked jet. Put yourself in their position for a second. You've spent 3 weeks watching a target that could vanish overnight. You have a 6-minute radar seam that might close as fast as it opened. And the one variable you can't control, refueling schedules on a base you can't see inside of, is about to become the thing that decides everything. By the 3rd week of May, all 8 Su-30SMs had landed. Ground crews began a routine most air forces treat as boring: turnaround servicing. Refuel, inspect, rearm, repeat. It's the least dramatic part of running an airbase, and it's also the moment when a fighter jet is at its most helpless. Full fuel tanks, no pilot strapped in, no chance to scramble. Ukrainian analysts studying the base's refueling patterns noticed something. On a normal night, aircraft rotated through the apron in staggered pairs. But starting May 24th, with all 8 jets now on the ground, and ground crew shifts stretched thin from a wave of new arrivals, the base started parking jets wingtip to wingtip on the northern dispersal pad to save time between shifts. Wingtip to wingtip, 9 meters apart, sometimes less. That's not how you park $400 million of aircraft if you're expecting to be hit. That's how you park it if you've convinced yourself you won't be. The man responsible for that stretch of apron was, by most accounts, a senior maintenance officer running on too little sleep and too few hands. Regimental records reviewed by Ukrainian analysts after the strike suggest the ground crew at Saky had been down 2 full maintenance teams since early May. Its personnel folded into a base already absorbing 8 new airframes and their support equipment. Understaffed crews don't choose to bunch aircraft together out of carelessness. They do it because spacing 8 jets properly across a dispersal pad this size takes more bodies than they have, and because nobody above them had ordered otherwise. It's a small, human decision, save 40 minutes on a shift changeover, that turned out to be the single most consequential choice made on that base in 3 weeks. Here's what's most surprising about this case. It isn't the drones, it's the complacency. 3 months of losses across Crimea, and Russian ground crews were still stacking aircraft close enough that one warhead could reach 2 airframes at once. Most people assume a base with an S-400 and 2 Pantsir batteries is effectively sealed. The evidence from Saky says otherwise. Air defense density doesn't fix a 6-minute radar seam, and it doesn't fix a ground crew cutting corners on spacing because they're short-staffed and tired. By May 26th, the target picture was set. 8 jets, fuel bowsers on rotation, a 6-minute gap in the radar net, and a ground crew working exhausted double shifts. What nobody on either side could plan for was the weather. A low-pressure system rolled in off the Black Sea on the night of May 26th, dropping visibility and pushing wind gusts past 40 kilometers per hour along the coast. Lyutyi drones fly best in calm air. Crosswinds at that speed can knock a fixed-wing airframe off its programmed track by hundreds of meters, enough to miss a target the size of a parked fighter jet entirely. The strike, planned for the night of the 26th, got scrubbed with less than 4 hours to launch. Group Shulika's commander made the call to wait one more night, rather than risk 14 drones and a rare radar window on a gust of wind nobody could predict. That single night of patience is the difference between a strike that works and a headline about Ukraine wasting a $2 million drone package on a miss. We should say the quiet part here. This wasn't a clean plan, executed on schedule. It was 3 weeks of failed approaches, 2 lost scout drones, 1 scrubbed launch, and a fair amount of luck lining up at the right moment. Every version of this story that makes it sound inevitable is skipping the part where it almost didn't happen. May 27th. Wind dropped to 12 kilometers per hour by nightfall. Clear skies over the Black Sea. The radar seam was due to reopen at 2:58 a.m. 14 Lyutyi drones launched from a dispersed site in southern Ukraine, spaced out over 11 minutes to avoid presenting radar operators with a single obvious wave. Here's the part that doesn't sit right with a lot of people who've covered this story. The Ukrainian operators didn't target the jets while they were in the air, when a hit would have been more survivable for the crews below. They waited for the exact window when the aircraft were parked, fueled, and defenseless, and struck the flight line instead. That's not an accident of timing. It's the whole strategy. So here's the real question this story keeps circling back to. It was never really, can Ukraine reach Saky? Reconnaissance drones had already proven that months earlier. The real question was whether 14 airframes, a 6-minute gap, and 1 badly timed gust of wind could all line up on the same night without a single thing going wrong. On May 27th, they did. At 2:53 a.m., 5 minutes before the seam was due to open, 4 of the 14 drones peeled off from the main group and flew a decoy loop north toward Yevpatoria. Russian radar operators clocked the movement and rotated 1 Pantsir's tracking arc to follow it. That's exactly what the decoy run was built to do. With 1 Pantsir's attention pulled north, the remaining 10 Lyutyi drones dropped altitude to roughly 50 meters above the water and ran the final approach along the coastline, under the S-400's detection floor and inside the 6-minute seam between the batteries. Inside the S-400's own command post, 18 kilometers south, a Russian radar operator would later have his shift log picked apart by an internal review board. Ukrainian analysts monitoring intercepted low-level radio chatter from that night say the first mention of unidentified low contact on the net comes at 3:02 a.m., 2 minutes after the drones had already crossed the coastline, and 3 minutes before the first warhead landed. Whatever that operator saw on his scope, it wasn't enough, and it wasn't fast enough. By the time the words left his mouth, the outcome was already decided. At 3:04 a.m., the first Lyutyi crossed the perimeter fence at Saky. The base's own early warning net picked up nothing until the drone was already over the apron. By then, it was too late to matter. What came next took 11 minutes, and it's the part satellite imagery would spend the following 3 days trying to piece back together. Warheads slam into the packed flight line at 3:05 a.m. The first hits an Su-30SM near the center of the row, tail number visible in later photos, its fuel tank still connected to a Bowser. The explosion ignites the Bowser's own fuel load, turning one warhead into what analysts later described as a secondary blast, roughly twice the size of the drone's own payload. The jet next to it, 9 meters away, catches fire within 90 seconds. Ground crews scramble. Base fire trucks reach the apron within 4 minutes, an unusually fast response that likely kept the fire from spreading to a third row of parked support vehicles nearby. 2 members of the ground crew that had been walking the line at the start of the shift are later confirmed among the injured, pulled clear of the second impact zone by colleagues who, by their own account, didn't have time to be scared, only to run. Regional hospital records reviewed afterward list no fatalities from the strike itself, though at least 3 servicemen were treated for burns and smoke inhalation over the following days. By 3:16 a.m., 3 more Lyutyi drones had reached secondary aim points on the apron, a fuel storage tank on the base's eastern edge, and a suspected radar trailer near the taxiway. The fuel tank strike is the one that mattered most. It didn't just burn, it kept burning. Local residents in Novofedorivka reported smoke visible from the coast road well past sunrise, nearly 4 hours after the last drone hit. By 3:16 a.m., it was over. Ukrainian operators reported all 14 drones as either impacting their targets or lost to air defense fire near the end of the run, with no confirmation on Russian losses beyond what satellite passes would later show. Would you have called it a success at that point, with no confirmed damage and a night sky full of smoke you couldn't yet measure? The operators didn't know either. They wouldn't know for 3 more days. Russian state channels moved fast, just not in the direction anyone expected. Within 2 hours, a regional telegram channel tied to Crimean administration called it a technical fire during routine maintenance. No mention of drones, no mention of casualties. By 8 a.m., a second statement upgraded the story to an isolated ground fire, extinguished, no threat to operations. That framing held for exactly 3 days. On May 30th, commercial satellite imagery from Planet Labs and Maxar circulated among open-source analysts. It showed the northern dispersal apron at Saky, in daylight. 3 scorched revetments, wreckage consistent with at least 2 destroyed Su-30SM airframes, and a third heavily damaged, and a blackened crater where the fuel storage tank had stood. Analysts working the imagery cross-referenced thermal bloom patterns against pre-strike photos to confirm airframe positions, matching scorch marks to the exact wingtip-to-wingtip spacing logged in the weeks before. It's tedious, unglamorous work, measuring shadows and comparing pixel by pixel, but it's what turned a denied technical fire into a documented strike within 72 hours. The ground fire explanation didn't survive contact with the imagery. What strikes me about this part of the story isn't the strike itself. It's the 3-day gap between what happened and what got admitted. That gap is where every modern war gets fought twice, once with drones and once with denial, and the second fight usually loses to a satellite pass eventually. By June 2nd, independent analysts tracking Russian military telegram channels counted internal complaints from officers about the decision to mass 8 jets on one apron. One post, later deleted, read roughly, "We told them not to park them like sardines." It's the kind of line that tells you more about institutional failure than any official statement ever will. Behind that deleted post sat a quieter process, a regimental inquiry, convened within the week, tasked with establishing who signed off on the wingtip-to-wingtip parking order and why the base's own dispersal protocol, which called for a minimum 30-meter interval between airframes, had been waived. 2 junior officers were reportedly reassigned within a month, a fact confirmed only by a change in duty rosters posted to a since-deleted unit channel, not by any public statement. No senior officer's name has surfaced in connection with the decision, and it's worth being honest about what that means. The people held responsible were the ones closest to the tarmac, not the ones who left 8 jets sitting there in the first place. Here's an unpopular opinion, and it'll probably get some pushback. The real failure at Saky wasn't a radar gap or a 6-minute seam. Radar gaps happen in every air defense network on Earth. The real failure was a command decision to consolidate high-value aircraft onto a single, undefended parking pattern because it was administratively convenient. That's not bad luck. That's a choice, and it cost roughly $150 to $200 million in destroyed and damaged airframes, depending on which 2 jets are confirmed total losses. Do you think Russia will actually change how it disperses aircraft after this, or will the next reinforcement wave get parked the exact same way? Comment below. We've seen this pattern repeat at 3 different bases in 14 months. By mid-June, Russian military bloggers had stopped calling Saky an isolated incident altogether. The consolidation strategy that was supposed to protect Crimea's remaining air power had instead built Ukraine a single target dense enough to be worth an 11-minute drone run. 3 Su-30SM airframes confirmed destroyed. A 4th, listed as heavily damaged, repair status unclear as of this recording. The fuel storage tank will take months to rebuild, and the 6-minute radar seam that made the whole operation possible almost certainly still exists somewhere along that coastline, because closing it means adding coverage Russia doesn't currently have the batteries to spare. We're not naming every base being watched right now, but if the pattern from Saky, Belbek, and Decoy tells you anything, it's that safest airfield on the peninsula has become a label with an expiration date. If you want the full breakdown of the Belbek strike that came before this one, it's linked at the end of this video, and it's the piece that explains why Saky's defenders should have seen this coming. That's the story of 8 jets, $400 million, and a 6-minute gap nobody closed in time. If this kind of frontline drone reporting matters to you, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which base you think gets hit next. We read every one of them.